Here at home, the RBI Governor has said that India's economy is in a far better place today and therefore there will be a marginal impact from the Ukraine war.
Clearly foresee that the inflation will moderate, and it did moderate. Because you see, the point is, if you start if you start initiating a premature demand compression through monetary policy action, then it would be counterproductive. There can be some spillovers, but whatever are the spillovers, I can say with reasonable amount of confidence that we will be able to maintain the stability of the Indian rupee. In fact, our interventions in the foreign exchange market, if you see, it is the standard policy. Our standard policy is that we intervene to prevent excessive volatility.
But the conflict in Ukraine, which is pushing oil prices higher, resulted in today's Sensex closing 571 points down, closing at 57,292, while the NSE Nifty also closed lower by 169 points. Meanwhile, crude oil prices rose over 6% today to settle at $114 a barrel earlier today. Supply concerns continue to persist as a result of the volatility in Europe. Australia's Prime Minister held a virtual summit meeting with Prime Minister Modi today, the second Quad leader to meet Mr. Modi in the last few days. Japan's Prime Minister was here last week. The Australian PM expressed concerns about the consequences of Russia's actions for the Indo-Pacific region, while Mr. Modi said the Quad alliance was important for regional and global stability.
As the crisis in Europe deepens over Russia's invasion of Ukraine, another Quad member holds meetings with Prime Minister Modi. Just days after the Japanese PM was here, now it was Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison. He and Mr. Modi met virtually today. In a repeat of what happened during the Japan visit, Mr. Morrison used strong words to describe Russia's actions, calling it an unlawful invasion of Ukraine. Prime Minister Modi did not make any reference to the war in his opening comments.
Quad leaders' call recently, which gave us the opportunity to discuss Russia's unlawful invasion of Ukraine, but it also gave us the opportunity to discuss the implications and consequences of that terrible event for our own region in the Indo-Pacific and the coercion and the issues that we face here.
हमारा यह सहयोग फ्री, ओपन और इंक्लूसिव इंडो पैसिफिक के प्रति हमारी प्रतिबद्धता को दर्शाता है। क्षेत्रीय और वैश्विक स्थिरता के लिए क्वाड की सफलता बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है।
Today's summit meeting comes days after a top Chinese official aggressively compared the Quad to NATO's expansion in Europe, calling it dangerous. PM Modi brought up the issue of China's transgressions in Ladakh.
Prime Minister did refer to the line of actual control in Ladakh, the incidents of the previous year, and he emphasized that peace and tranquility in the border areas was an essential prerequisite for normalization of relations with China. Obviously, the Ukraine issue was discussed, as was the issue of China. On Ukraine, I think it was clear that the two sides had referred to the Quad summit, in which the leaders had a fairly clear perspective that the situation in Ukraine should not impact on the Indo-Pacific.
With the Ukraine war dragging on, there is plenty of diplomatic activity in New Delhi at the moment. After Australia and Japan, a senior US official is also here, and the Israeli Prime Minister will come in April. Bureau Report, NDTV.
And it was an emotional farewell for Indian student Naveen, who was killed in Ukraine in Russian shelling a few weeks ago. His body was finally flown home to Karnataka 3 weeks after his death. After the puja was performed today, his body was donated by his family for medical research.
Emotions rained high through the streets of Chalgare village. Scores of people from here and neighbouring areas came for the final farewell of Naveen Shekharappa, the fourth-year student killed in the shelling in Kharkiv on March 1st.
He was very ambitious about his medical education. now you handed your body to the SS Medical College Davangere, sir. So which will be helpful for us. We tried generally in government seat all over Karnataka and India, but due to some reason he is unable to get the seat.
Simple nature, friendly nature. We are playing gully cricket.
After a procession, Naveen's parents handed over his remains to doctors in Chalgare, from where the body was transported to SS Medical College in Davangere district, about 35 kilometers from Naveen's hometown. It's taken almost 20 days for Naveen's body to be brought home because of the intense fighting in Ukraine. His remains were brought early this morning at the Bengaluru International Airport. Of the 19,000 Indian students who returned from the war-torn Ukraine, 572 students are from Karnataka and around 62 students had returned to the state before the start of Operation Ganga. Speaking about Indian students leaving the state for pursuing MBBS in Ukraine, Chief Minister Baswaraj Bommai said that the government will be reducing the cost very soon.
We have to sit up and look into the cost of medical education, which is going very high. And as far as Karnataka is concerned, I have made already a meeting of all our concerned officers of medical education minister and health and our finance, everybody. And we have decided now to categorize our colleges, especially in Karnataka, ABC, and see that the rates, the fees are come down as per the facilities.
Through the journey, the hearse van carrying the mortal remains of Naveen was showered with petals. In fact, there is a closure to especially the endless wait for his body. All that the Naveen's parents ask for is to ensure that all the students who aspire to become doctors, in fact, a medical seat at an affordable price. In Chalagari, with camera person Govind Murthy, Shrija for NDTV.
On to politics now. Ex-cricketer Harbhajan Singh, IIT professor Sandeep Pathak, educationist Ashok Kumar Mittal, Delhi MLA Raghav Chadha are among the Aam Aadmi Party's nominees for the Rajya Sabha from Punjab, where the party just won a massive landslide in the recent elections. Harbhajan Singh filed his nomination as an AAP candidate. He was seen in a yellow turban, inspired by Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann, sitting next to him. After the upcoming Rajya Sabha election, AAP's strength in the upper house is set to increase from 3 to 8 MPs.
मैं अपनी मदर के साथ आज राज्य सभा का नॉमिनेशन भरने आया हूं और मेरे लीडर अरविंद केजरीवाल जी ने, पंजाब के मुख्यमंत्री मेरे बड़े भाई भगवंत मान साहब ने इतना विश्वास मुझ में दिखाया है कि इतनी छोटी सी उम्र में, इतनी कम आयु में इतनी बड़ी जिम्मेदारी मेरे कंधों पे डाल ली है। मैं परमात्मा से प्रार्थना करता हूं कि इतनी शक्ति बख्शे कि हम ईमानदारी की राह पे चल के जो जिम्मेदारी मेरी पार्टी, मेरे नेता, मेरे लीडर, मेरे मेंटोर अरविंद केजरीवाल जी मुझे दे रहे हैं, मैं उसे बखूबी निभा सकूं।
जहां पे मैं जाऊंगा मैं वहां पे अपना ज़रूर जो मुझे लगता है कि बात रखने वाली है मैं रखूंगा। वो स्पोर्ट्स की बात हो या पंजाब की किसी और क्षेत्र की बात हो तो मैं ज़रूर वो बात करूंगा जिससे पंजाब का भला हो। स्पोर्ट्स के रिलेटेड जितनी भी चीज़ें हैं पंजाब में, हिंदुस्तान में, जो हम बेटर कर सकें। हम ओलंपिक में जाते हैं, हम 2 मेडल लेके आते हैं, ऐसी खुशी मनाते हैं कि जैसे बहुत कुछ कर लिया। मुझे लगता है इंडिया जैसे कंट्री को कम से कम 200 मेडल लेके आने चाहिए, तो उसके ऊपर काम होना चाहिए। तो मेरा मेन मोटिव वो रहेगा कि स्पोर्ट्स जो है वो प्रमोट हो, स्पोर्ट्स आगे आए।
The BJP, meanwhile, has decided to stick to the tried and tested. The party is giving all 4 incumbent chief ministers another chance. Of course, there's Yogi Adityanath, who's going to continue, Mr. Biren Singh in Manipur. And today, they have announced that Pramod Sawant will be chief minister in Goa once again, as well as Pushkar Dhami in Uttarakhand, although Mr. Dhami lost his own seat in the recently held assembly elections. My colleague Sukirti joining us live now for more on that story. And Sukirti, there was quite a tussle, which is why it actually took so many days for the BJP to come to a decision on Mr. Dhami. Why did they then decide to stick with him in the end?
Well, firstly, there was suspense for so many days because the party initially was a bit hesitant to go ahead with a leader as the chief minister, in whom the public had not expressed its trust because he lost from the Khatima constituency, from where he had, however, won for the last 2 terms. Now, looking at the reasons that worked in Mr. Dhami's favour, one was the fact that he had been the chief minister for only 7 months so far, and the BJP wanted to give him a chance, enough time to prove himself, and also to have a stable government in Uttarakhand. Last year in July, when Mr. Dhami was chosen as the chief minister, just before him, 2 chief ministers, Mr. Trivendra Singh Rawat and Mr. Tirath Singh Rawat, had been changed in quick succession. So the BJP did not want to come across as a party that is indecisive, that does not have faith in its own leaders, and in order to maintain stability in the government, it wanted to continue Mr. Dhami's tenure. One other factor that worked very strongly in Mr. Dhami's favour was the fact that a lot of local MLAs here were supporting Mr. Dhami. If the BJP had gone ahead with a new name and all the local MLAs did not support this new chief minister, then the government would have found it very tough to function, because across the hierarchy there has to be support for the leader that is heading them. So all of these factors really worked in favour of Mr. Dhami, and now all eyes on his swearing-in ceremony that is set to take place on 23rd of March at the parade ground, which has a seating capacity of over 20,000 people, and even senior leaders of the BJP are expected there.
All right, thanks very much for that, Sukirti. And my colleague Sanket Upadhyay now explains the politics of what really went on and why it's taken the BJP so long to come to a decision on chief ministers, and also what's going on in UP.
So yes, there are no surprises, but is this a Modi gamble? Well, the BJP has repeated all 4 chief ministers in the states that it won. But despite losing, let's take a look at this one by one. Despite losing his seat, Pushkar Singh Dhami has been cleared for the position of Uttarakhand Chief Minister. This could in fact be seen as an attempt to contain the factional divide in the BJP's Uttarakhand unit. Dhami will now have to win the by-polls in about 6 months from now. Let's shift to Goa, where Pramod Sawant, again no surprise, was the existing Chief Minister, has been declared the Chief Minister again. This decision taken even as Vishwajit Rane's name emerged as one of the front-runners. There are support of independents which have ensured that the BJP goes ahead with its choice of Pramod Sawant. Now, both these names were cleared in a meeting at the Prime Minister's residence last night. But all eyes will be on the very crucial Uttar Pradesh, where while the Chief Minister has not been changed and the elections were fought in the leadership of Yogi Adityanath, but despite losing, will Keshav Prasad Maurya, a man who was seen very close to Modi and Shah, be made the Deputy Chief Minister? Maurya was seen in a meeting with Prime Minister ahead of the UP elections. All governments have seen a very clear Modi-Shah influence, but is UP going to be different? And that is the most contentious bit. What decision is going to be taken as far as Yogi's cabinet is concerned, which has seen certain sparks between the centre as well as the state? Is UP going to see a Yogi government or a Modi government?
11 days after the BJP's massive UP win and 4 days before Yogi Adityanath's swearing in, a key question remains unanswered. Kaun banega Deputy CM? The biggest suspense right now, if I can use that word, is over Keshav Prasad Maurya, the outgoing Deputy Chief Minister, and the question as to whether he retains his spot in the new UP cabinet or not. Now, Mr. Maurya lost his Vidhan Sabha elections from Siratu. Dropping Keshav Prasad Maurya, though, is not easy for the BJP. He is a big OBC face for the party, and the national election is just 2 years away.
हार नहीं उन्हीं की जीत है, उन्हीं के नेतृत्व में पूरा प्रदेश का चुनाव लड़ा गया। माननीय मोदी जी से और योगी जी से करबद्धता पूर्वक प्रार्थना करते हैं कि माननीय श्री केशव प्रसाद मौर्य जी को उप मुख्यमंत्री पद पर फिर से आसीन किया जाए और उनके पद और गरिमा को किसी भी दिशा में घटाया न जाए। हम लोगों को बहुत ही दुख होगा।
BJP sources say a potential replacement could be this man. State BJP Chief Swatantra Dev Singh, also a prominent OBC face for the party. The BJP's other Deputy CM in UP, Dinesh Sharma, a prominent Brahmin face, did not fight the state election. And sources say he may be given a different, non-government role this time. A potential replacement could be this man, Law Minister Brajesh Pathak, also a Brahmin. Another name in the mix, former Uttarakhand Governor Baby Rani Maurya, a senior party leader from a SC community who won from Agra.
माना जा रहा है कि आप डिप्टी सीएम पद की दावेदार हैं और पहले भी आपको बड़ी महत्वपूर्ण जानकारी मिल चुकी है, चर्चा भी बहुत तेज हो गई है, तो आप कितनी
आप ही लोग दे रहे हैं मेरे को तो जानकारी, मुझे तो कहा नहीं गया।
Preparations on in full swing meanwhile at this Lucknow stadium, where over 50,000 people are expected to attend Adityanath's swearing in this Friday. In Lucknow with camera person Rajesh Gupta, this is Alok Pandey, NDTV.
Well, if you thought Zomato delivering your food in 30 minutes was fantastic, the company has now announced a 10-minute food delivery service, although there is some debate on whether that's actually a good idea. This comes after they announced their tie-up with Blinkit, which is a well-known instant delivery service. So this seems to have been a model adopted after this particular merger. It will be the first company to deliver food in 10 minutes, they say, all across the world.